Larry, our final segment, how can we get there from here? I'm quoting you once again. There is only one way to return to living under the principles of the Declaration of Independence and the institutions of the Constitution. We must come to love these things again. How?
Well, you have to know about them. Partly, I confess it, I'm like the hammer who looks at everything as if it were a nail. And everything is a teaching opportunity, right? But the great presidents are teachers. You know, what Reagan's speech that you showed last night, and contrast it to some recent presidents without naming any of them. Reagan was this big-time explainer. Mm-hmm. It's a generous thing to do to somebody else, to lay out what you think, to labor to make it clear to them. Not to be, to invite them into your thought process, which of course you can't do unless you make it more clear than it is if you're just talking to yourself.
Right.
That's a generous and fine impulse. That's why Abraham Lincoln's speeches are beautiful. I like that word because that's a good translation of a fundamental Greek word called kalon. To kalon, Aristotle says. It has therefore been kalon said that every human action aims for the good. The highest form of the good is the beautiful thing. You can't read some speech of Abraham Lincoln if you read it carefully. I had this experience one time. I've been studying Lincoln since graduate school, and a friend of mine, Lou Lehrman, you mentioned him last night in your talk, wrote a book about Lincoln's Peoria address. And I started reading the book. It's a very good book.
Peoria Address is 1838.
No,
early?
It's 1850.
Sorry.
6, I think.
Okay.
And it's Lincoln's history of slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking of the Lyceum Address.
I am, correct.
And I hadn't read that thing for a long time, and I read the first chapter of Lou's book, and it's very good. And I said, I'm going to sit down and read that book. Read that speech again before I go on, because I'd read it many, many times, but not for a long time. And about 30 minutes later, my wife came in the room, and she said, "Are you okay, dear?" And I said, "Yes, I'm very well." And she said, "Are you crying?" And I said, "Well, I was a little bit." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "You should read this speech. It's lovely, because it's a simple and fine explanation of the history of slavery in our country. That great man Lincoln went into the Springfield Library and spent months putting it together. And today I can remember roughly how slavery moved in our country because he lays it out. But then he combines that at the end with this lovely explanation of why the principles of our country are capable of reaching and protecting every human being and ennobling them because they get to participate in rule. Now that's beautiful, and to know that is to love it. And so what we really just need is for people to know that.
Larry, from the sublime to, I hope it's not ridiculous, but it sure ain't sublime in itself, the current Republican field. Where is the Lincoln? Where is the Reagan? Marco Rubio's out. Paul Ryan is out. Mitch Daniels is out. I was chatting with Michael Barone, our mutual friend, a couple of weeks ago. Michael is, I believe, the finest political journalist in the country, largely because he's such a good historian.
Yeah.
And I said, how do you rate the current Republican field? And he said, none of the people I would consider in my top 10 for accomplishment and talent is running for president. Why? What does that say about the state of the republic?
In the classic books, statesmanship, which is a very, very high form of human art, the political art, is so rare that it's sometimes used as a synonym for chance. And we're in a very frustrating period right now because there are some great ones, it looks to me like, and they're young, a little too young. And I think if God gets done with us, you know, he might put things out of whack in just that way. Now, but on the other hand, they're alive, the ones we admire. And you know, Peter, you're alive. You know, that matters. There are people here in this room, they're alive. It matters. We're not done. And we don't know what's going to happen. We just know what we're supposed to do. Now, about these guys who are running right now, I think the only thing wrong with them, because, by the way, I don't in general think that politicians I meet are bad people. I think they're even above the common run. They're ambitious.
You have a good heart, Larry Arnn.
A lot of them are very... Now, what I do think, though, because remember, I'm a hammer, and I think of things like a nail, but a lot of them, they haven't had the privilege or taken the privilege of learning deeply. That's not on offer much anymore. Used to be, and it used to be that everybody learned a bunch of really cool stuff about American history, because it is really great. And, the founders were slaveholders, right? That's what we dwell on now. Well, we should dwell on it. Because, by the way, how did they come to proclaim those principles, being slaveholders? Look at it hard. You'll find out it's a proof of their sincerity. And so if you started out a political career understanding that there's a center to America, and that one of my jobs is to become an expert on that because I'm going to use it, then even an ordinary statesman would be made extraordinary. And we're not doing that today.
Larry, last question. You're the president of this magnificent institution. It's small. It's in the middle of the lower tier of Michigan, and everything is an hour and a half or 2 hours away.
Isn't that great?
Okay. So how do you think of Hillsdale College? Do you think of Hillsdale College as part of a movement of restoration that is gaining strength? Or do you think of Hillsdale College as a kind of citadel or monastery where the faith will be kept even despite the gathering dark age?
It's the first, right? We're not putting up defenses around here. We're on the attack. No, what I think is the college is, first of all, it's very beautiful in its beginning, right? It had so much to do with the coming of Abraham Lincoln to the presidency, right? And some of our students were pallbearers for him. And that's because they had earned that place in blood. They were very serious people back here who started this place. I came here mostly because of them and because of the things they wrote. But then, what do you find out when you work here in a place like this? First of all, this place is, the students come here from every corner of the land. And we got more applications than we can deal with. And why is that happening? Because of the attraction of beautiful things. When I say that I believe if people understand the founding of their country, they will love it. First of all, I love it. But second of all, I watch people come to love it all the time. And because, another thing about it is we give C's here. And you go somewhere else, you can get A's. And why
I take it back about that big heart of yours.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's not me. I'm not the worst around here, I can tell you by a long shot. There's a couple of guys that are just ogres. And the kids tend to love them. So the point is, that is a rich and great experience to participate in, but it radiates. And it radiates for a lot of reasons. Every college, by the way, radiates around itself because the attraction of what happens in them is very powerful. And if they're ugly, by the way, they radiate in an ugly way, and some of them are that today. Now, we radiate particularly much because we're strange. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, the college made a decision not to take any money from the government. And it reiterated that decision under 3 presidents now. And that's a crazy thing to do. It's just, nobody would look at that and think that was the least bit financially sensible. But it drives you somewhere. You have to talk to a lot of people. And you have to justify what you do inside and outside constantly. So that means that the college is a force for understanding of national reach. That's a valuable thing, we think.
Dr. Larry Arnn, 12th president of Hillsdale College, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Peter Robinson from Hillsdale College. On behalf of Uncommon Knowledge, Thanks for joining us.